Excuse me, sorry. Hey, how's it going? Uh, great. Thanks, John. Great to see such a nice crowd here for what's going to be a really special final last lecture of the year. Um, I just finished my last class here ever, so I'm super nostalgic. It'll be all of you soon. What a run! What a run! Okay, it's my honor to introduce Professor Martha Minow, who's been teaching here since, 1981.
12.
She started as a 12-year-old. She's been prodigious her whole life. She served as the dean for 8 years between 2009 and 2017, and now she serves as the 300th anniversary university professor, a distinct title. I could go on. She's an expert in seemingly an infinite number of areas, so we're not going to get into that. But I think most importantly, Professor Minow is kind, she's empathetic, she has a great sense of humor, and she's Midwestern, which I love. On a personal note, I've taken a few classes with Professor Minow, and she's constantly served as an inspiration to me. It's truly such an honor to introduce her today for the final last lecture for the class of 2025, so please join me in welcoming her.
It is such an honor to be here. For how many people have you had your last class? Let me see. How many people have one more class? How many have two more classes? How many have three more classes? All right, all right. So we know where we are, but you're at the home stretch. This is incredible. We searched the world for you, and now you're leaving us. I'm so honored to be part of this journey, and I just want you to know Harvard Law School is better because of you. And the hopes for the future are better because of you. This is actually my third time to give a last lecture. I don't know how many times you can give a last lecture. But I once learned that if you tell people you're going to make 3 points, they will listen. They will actually write them down. This reminds me of Henry James, who briefly attended Harvard Law School. Did you know this? The great novelist. He, like Cole Porter, there's a lot of dropouts that are wonderful. Henry James left to write his classic fiction, and he once said, 3 things in human life are important. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. The third is to be kind. And actually, I think there are 3 reasons to make kindness a priority. First, it will come back to you. Kindness in return. If not directly, then triggering kindness in response. Second, it'll make you feel good. And actually, as people at the Harvard Medical School have now documented, kindness has benefits to physical and mental health. And third, kindness can build the world you want to live in locally, nationally, globally. On the first, your kindness will come back to you. I remember an early job I had before I became a lawyer. I was the lowest of the lowest in a newspaper. I was a copy clerk. And the task was to, among other things, deliver the newspaper to people in the newsroom, to cut and paste. Remember that? Physically cut and paste the crossword puzzle and put it in the page. And my job was basically to do whatever anybody asked. I was a gopher for the reporters, getting coffee and lunch, sharpening pencils, and learning to wear gloves because I got ink from the newsprint all over me. On a great day, I would not get yelled at too much. The newsroom was filled with very busy people. They treated me and everybody else very brusquely, but usually treated me as if I were invisible. There was one reporter, though, who asked my name, started conversations, treated me like a person. And it was so meaningful, I never forgot it. I'm still here remembering it. I remember the conversations. It made me kinder to even the meanest person in the room. the columnist who barked orders, and I remember his name too. Remembering this experience continues to influence how I try to be in the world, because I knew what it felt like to be recognized and not invisible. And when I was dean, I hired an amazing person who is still here, Liberty Keneally. If you haven't met her, go say hello. I met her in the interview, and I talked about kindness. I said, what does it take to treat people with kindness and to make an organization have kindness as its actual feature? And she said, we each have the power. We just have to think about using that power. And if Harvard Law School is a kinder, gentler place than you see in the movies, she's a lot of the reason for it. So what is kindness anyway, and how can it come back to you? Kindness are qualities of being friendly, generous, considerate, doing favors for others, contributing to and wanting to contribute to another's well-being. And research shows how kindness boosts our moods. It decreases our loneliness. That's itself, of course, linked to negative health. And performing acts of kindness lowers our blood pressure and stress-related hormone levels. One study shows that doing a kind deed every day for 7 days can boost people's happiness and works even if the acts occur without feeling kind. Isn't that interesting? Just pretend to be kind, and you'll be healthier. Apparently, the change happens from the outside in, bolstering psychological and physical health, reducing symptoms of anxiety, increasing social connection. And you are kind. You know the prime examples: complimenting people, running errands for a neighbor, leaving a bigger tip for a service worker, listening to somebody who's having a bad day, sharing your class notes, letting someone jump in front of you in line at the heart because they have a class to make, giving critical feedback to another person as you would like to get it yourself, gently, with something positive to say, something constructive, so it can actually be heard and acted upon. Volunteering, doing pro bono work, smiling, holding the door open when you see them fumbling for their ID, unless they're a stranger and you don't let them in the buildings. I remain forever grateful to someone I barely knew 25 years ago who stopped to change my flat car tire. And I told him so this past weekend, because you see, we became good friends after that. Do you have to know someone to be kind? Or can it be between strangers? I've always loved this story. It's an old one about Rachel, the woman who answered the phone long before there was caller ID. And this is what she heard. "Darling, how are you? This is Mama." Rachel said, "Oh, Mama, I'm having a bad day. The baby's upset. The dishwasher's broken. I haven't gone shopping yet. I banged my shin. I'm hobbling around. The house is a mess. And on top of that, the neighbors are coming for dinner, and I don't know how I'm going to get the groceries cooked, do everything." Darling, Mama's got this. Sit down. Do nothing. For 30 minutes, just relax. I'll do the shopping. I'll clean up. I'll cook dinner. I'll take care of the baby. I know a repair person. Stop crying. Mama's taking care of everything. In fact, I'll call Sam at the office and tell him to come home early and help you out for once. Long pause. Sam? Who's Sam? Why, Sam, your husband. Oh, dear. Is this 5647721? No, it's 5647712. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have the wrong number. There's another pause. Does that mean you're not coming? Responses to kindness can be very surprising. A lawyer I know had a first job after law school, was a very junior associate in a litigation firm, and then had the surprising experience of a partner coming in and saying, "I have to argue this motion today, but I can't make it, so you have to make the appearance." The lawyer was very nervous. She'd never appeared in court before. She walked in the courtroom, and opposing counsel was already there, and he said, "Can you get me a cup of coffee, honey?" And she could have said, "Get your own coffee, you sexist pig." But instead she said, "Cream or sugar?" She got the coffee, came back in the courtroom, handed it to him, and then sat down at the opposing counsel table. He was so rattled he could barely speak. The judge ruled in her favor. Moral of the story, sometimes kindness can be a significant strategic advantage. Okay, the second reason to be kind is it makes you feel good, but why? Why is that? I've already mentioned the physical and mental benefits. Apparently, we are evolutionarily created to be people who find, creatures who find kindness rewarding because we're social creatures and building networks, force multiplying. One of the lessons, though, that may be hardest for many of us to learn is you have to be kind to yourself. A Buddhist teacher explains, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. There's an actor named Misha Collins. Do you know Supernatural? Anybody know Supernatural? No. 2 people know Supernatural. All right. Misha Collins says, be kind to yourself so you can be happy enough to be kind to the world. I think that's really good. There's a giving and receiving that goes on with kind. Be kind to others so that you may learn the secret art of being kind to yourself is another way to think about it. That's the advice from a monk, a Hindu monk. And this kindness thing truly shows the wisdom across civilizations and disciplines. On the kindness front, I've learned that it's important not to take things personally. It's important to have a thicker skin. Kind yourself to do so. It was Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg who recalled her mother's advice for good marriage. You've heard this, right? It helps to be a little deaf, she said. And then she added in one interview, that's true at the workplace too. And that's true at the Supreme Court, she said. But if you are repeatedly insulted with no apology or acknowledgement, you know what? Kindness to yourself means speak up or else limit contact with the offender. I'll tell you one of the benefits of getting older is that I just have made the decision I'm going to ration my exposure to toxic people. No comment about who they are, but my life is much better. Psychologists teach us that our positive connections and our interactions with people are often the greatest predictor of happiness. And it's measured at the level of the nervous system. If you actually also are able to report that you're happy. And it turns out from about the age of 18 months old, children have a natural instinct to be kind, to pick up something that someone's dropped, to give hugs or kisses to someone who looks sad. I know an 18-month-old who actually will eat something and have this smile of joy and then share it. We somehow have to get back there because I don't do that. Kindness to others can be healing. Research from the Mayo Clinic, world-class medical center from the Midwest, shows how acts of kindness activate the part of the brain that makes us feel pleasure. That translates into improved performance in work and improved happiness. When we show kindness, when we really listen, when we show signs of caring, when we say thank you and mean it, and often we feel good, and others do as well. And acts of kindness, you won't believe this, but there's good research about this, will make you happier than a high salary. I know you don't believe it, but that's what the research shows. And this is longitudinal. This may be something to remind the law firm partners who have left for the highest bidder in search of more money. That may also be crushing the independence and ethical commitments of law firms. We need to remind ourselves about the importance of kindness, especially as lawyers. A writer in the UK, writing specifically to lawyers, says that kindness may be inconsistent with the cut and thrust and competitive nature of the law, but points to research showing that kindness in the workplace can create a ripple effect throughout a whole organization, resulting in a happier workforce with employees who experience greater job satisfaction, autonomy, and feel more competent in their jobs. The Harvard Business Review shows how, in repeated articles, respect and expressing warmth are qualities of the most effective leaders. Treating people well means that they will be more likely to work for you and want to work for you and to do well for you. And civility is contagious, says one article in the Harvard Business Review. Now, many of us are drawn to places like Harvard that are demanding, competitive, not always kind. My sister, Nell, who's a wise lawyer, says that this means we spend a lot of our time in our own heads. The imperative to be kind turns our thoughts outwards as we observe the world around us, rather than being in our own heads. And it's a healthy reorientation that makes us perceptive and understanding. And this is really something from my older sister, who, let me just say, she's a critic, and she learned to be a critic because I came on the scene. Now, profoundly, the writer Maya Angelou noted, I learned that people will forget what you said, but people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. It's really true. And then there's the really bad dad joke. What did the compassionate pencil say to the paper? I'm here to erase all your problems. Okay, so practically, be kind because it can make the difference in a job hunt and a career. And I had a fascinating experience. I served for 10 years on the selection committee for the Skadden Fellowship. You know what the Skadden Fellowship is. This is an awesome, coveted opportunity to get a fellowship for public interest work. It has supported so much great work, launched careers of fantastic lawyers. Really hard to select from the talent pool. But there was one criterion that we used over the years that was constant. We always asked the receptionist assistant, who was the frontline contact for the applicants, about her impressions of the candidates. How did they treat her? Anyone who failed her test, who failed to treat her with kindness and respect, were automatically rejected. Why are people unkind? Tina Fey, no, not that Tina Fey, a different Tina Fey. She collected 25 reasons to explain unkindness, and she calculated that unkind people are self-centered, immature, envious, judgmental, insecure, never dealt with trauma, insecure, lazy, greedy, scared, angry, insecure, lacking empathy, and lack of self-esteem. Now, the real Tina Fey, the brilliant comedian, she says, start with yes and see where it takes you. I'm sure she learned that in improv, you know, yes and, but it's a really good idea. Sadly, many people who are unkind have experienced unkindness. My sister Mary reminds me, hurt people hurt people. But kindness can be a superpower, a kind of critical buffer against harsh realities, including discrimination, exclusion, injustice. Kindness is a glue that allows us to stand in solidarity, and kindness amplifies and mobilizes support. And I have learned this working in political campaigns, in litigation efforts. Kindness interpersonally builds connections and assistance. The opposite produces adverseness and even cruelty. And that's within a team, and that's with the opponents as well. Makes a huge difference. A recent call to action for marginalized communities in uncertain times. There, I said one of the words, like women, racial, underappreciated. You're not supposed to use marginalized. You know this. The federal government will then yank your money if you use these words. I can go on. The words include black, diversity, underappreciated, victim, women. I don't know what it does to diversity jurisdiction, but there it is. Currently, if you actually are thinking about how to thrive in challenging times, the call to action says it might seem like a passive virtue, but in reality, kindness is an active force that can confront hate and injustice. Choosing kindness in a time of heightened division is a radical act. It asserts that every human being is worthy of dignity and respect. And kindness can be strategic because it builds networks of mutual aid. So this takes me to the third reason to choose kindness. Kindness can build a better world, the world you want to live in, locally, nationally, and globally. Surveys of people in the United States show that a majority of employees do not believe that their employer cares about their well-being. But unkindness is present in policies, not just interpersonally, in social media. But it can change. Kindness is a critical ingredient, a driver of change, and a darn good benchmark for groups, institutions, and societies. In the World Happiness Report, based on the Gallup World Poll, the United States is not doing very well. It ranks number 24, and it's dipping each year. It's going down. And out of the 150 countries that are measured for happiness this year, 2025, not a single large industrial power is in the top 20 for reported happiness. What does that tell us about what we're doing? Interestingly, the study relies in its rankings for reports of actual behaviors that show kindness, not just how people feel. How many people give to charity? How many people volunteer? How many people help the stranger? It also asks questions like about trust, whether or not you expect if you've lost your wallet that a stranger will return it. And the study shows that believing that others would return a wallet predicts a larger boost to life satisfaction than doubling of income. I told you you wouldn't believe me, but the evidence is there. Other studies show that there's an epidemic of unkindness, meanness, selfishness, resentment, hate. Social media amplification has something to do with it. Fear and insecurity has something to do with it. COVID lockdowns resulting economic dislocation has something to do with it. That's why I think it's cool when you see very big and bold acts of kindness, which made me think about the Kind bars. So the founder of Kind, not that I'm hungry or anything, Daniel Lubetzky, a Stanford graduate, he created something called the Frontline Impact Project, a platform for healthcare and other frontline responders to request resources. Initially, in the fight against COVID-19, he recruited, dozens and dozens of other businesses to help. His current work is using this platform to address the still devastating effects of recent fires in Los Angeles. That's pretty good to see. Somebody who's made a lot of money who's actually turning it back. We're living in a time, though, of massive unkindness, of bullying, fear of it, and worse. And politically, even constitutional democracies increasingly see hardball, demolishing unwritten norms of civility, reciprocity, fairness. Our colleague Mark Tushnet identified what he called constitutional hardball as the exploitation of procedures, laws, and institutions by political actors for partisan gain in ways that violate pre-existing norms and push the bounds of legality. Our political scientists here, Daniel Ziblatt and Stephen Levitsky, have studied democracies that slide into tyranny. And they've concluded that one of the predictors is the use of constitutional hardball, authoritarianism in Argentina, in Venezuela, the use of legal court packing to cement power. In the United States, some elected leaders are using the debt ceiling and budget deadlines to force others to agree to their demands, disenfranchising voters, making the filibuster a routine practice to shut out debate, using executive orders that defy the law. And as I was preparing these remarks, my news feed reported on inhumane conditions in detention centers that are used by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement right now. Immigrants forced to sleep on the floor, immigrants held in a Miami conference room with no access to a toilet, a prison in New Mexico that doesn't have enough chairs for all the immigrant detainees to even eat their meals at a table. At a Prairie Land detention center in Alvarado, Texas, some immigrant women are forced to sleep on the concrete floor because all of the beds in the female holding unit have been taken. You're stripped from your humanity, said one woman, America Platt, 29 years old, who slept 4 sleepless nights on Prairie Land's floor after the police arrested her on a warrant for an unresolved traffic ticket and turned her over to ICE. She was deported last month to Mexico. She hadn't lived there since fleeing her abusive father 2 decades ago. Unkindness can range from carelessness to cruelty. Cruelty too often seems to be not a bug, but a feature of contemporary public policy. It can come from individuals who are defending their egos, who are mentally unable to cope, who accept human suffering as an unavoidable collateral damage, or even who gain pleasure from the distress of others. And I am not naive enough to think that smiles and holding doors open will fix our world. But I am convinced by the neuroscientist Abhijit Naskar, who says, humanity begins with admitting inhumanity. And maybe in this era of artificial intelligence, it is the distinctive human ability to be kind, to have true compassion and empathy, that not only will make our world better, but will keep our jobs and maybe save our lives. Among humans, kindness, like yawning, is contagious. Have you ever done that? Have you ever yawned in front of someone, and then they yawn? It's really fun. But you could try it with kindness. We copy it. We relish it. We feel better after giving and receiving it. And artificial intelligence actually can learn unkindness really, really well. You remember Tay, the chatbot from 2016? It was designed to pick up speech interactions from people who posted on the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, and was barraged with antisocial ideas and vulgar languages. And within a few hours, its creator, Microsoft, shut it down because it was so hateful. Current generative large language models build in guardrails, use so many data points, and maybe they won't actually produce what we saw with Tay. And if so, it'll be because they're humans who are choosing to make it so. And ironically, maybe humans are now designing some artificial intelligence tools to remind human beings to be kind to one another. No doubt, as we all enter a world with ever more tech-mediated interactions, with inequality and mistakes, we're going to need much more focus on human kindness and forgiveness and relationships, which takes me to the biggest authority, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers said, all of us at some time or another need help. Whether we're giving or receiving help, each of us has something valuable to bring to this world. That's one of the things that connects us as neighbors. In our own way, each of us is a giver and a receiver. It's more blessed to give than to receive, especially someone says, if it's kittens. Have you ever had kittens? Okay. So I do have a hope, and I hope that here in your time at Harvard, I hope you each have received a lot. Valuable knowledge, memorable experiences, enduring friendships. I know you've given a lot. And as you head out, I have two final words and a last story. The first set of words are from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, another Harvard graduate. He said, all of us at some time or another need help. Whether we're giving or receiving help, each of us has something valuable. There's one thing that connects us, is giving. And then from the self-taught President Abraham Lincoln in his second inaugural address, as the Civil War was still smoldering, he summoned kindness in service of peace and justice. And he said, with malice towards none, charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, and to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all our nations. He was killed 44 days later. One last story. My very first day of law school, my first class was contracts. I was called on within the first 10 minutes by Professor Ellen Peters. I had no clue what she was talking about. The assigned reading involved something called a sumpsit. I was somewhat relieved that she translated it and then asked me how to resolve a disagreement between dorm roommates over a contract to share the cost of a mini fridge. Now, this freaked me out because my roommate and I had a contract for a mini fridge that we had negotiated the day before. I was convinced there was surveillance in my room. Now, thank goodness, Professor Peters was kind as she coaxed answers from me and others. And then I saw in the class how truly tuned in she was. As a teacher, a scholar, a justice, a human being, she became a justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court. A year later, she became the Chief Justice of Connecticut. She did have this odd habit of asking a question, looking up at the ceiling. And so we all started looking up at the ceiling. Maybe it's up there. But unlike some other faculty members, who I will not name, she went out of her way not to embarrass anyone in class. She was dazzlingly smart, just intimidatingly smart, but good-natured and inspiring. And as a justice, she wrote opinions and advanced justice in profound ways, bringing sensitivity and compassion, especially to cases involving children and people with disabilities. She passed away last year, and at her memorial service, her son, James, shared that in her last years, Chief Justice Peters dealt with the cruelties of Alzheimer's disease. And James explained that as her memories went out to sea, isn't that a powerful image? One by one, she was left with only one memory, till the day that she died. And this was it. She and her mother and her sister were refugees from Nazi Germany. She was 9 years old. They moved to New York City. She was enrolled in the public school, didn't speak a word of English. She went to school for about a week, and then she got ill and came back 3 weeks later, went back to that classroom and didn't recognize anyone, and was bewildered and didn't know what to do and didn't speak English. She went out in the hallway, and an adult saw her, took her by the hand, found in the office where she should go. That was the memory she held on to until she died. And as James, her son, concluded, that act of kindness remained with her until the very end. So when in doubt, be kind. It may be the last thing a person remembers. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so we've got a bit of time for some questions, and Professor Minow will be gracious enough to answer them. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll run the mic to you. But let's make the most of these last 15 minutes together here. Any questions?
Any jokes?
Thank you so much, Professor Minow. My question is about how a society that's lacking kindness can consciously build policy that makes a kinder world, and specifically whether you can teach kindness in schools. Can it become part of a curriculum, or is that missing the point?
How kind of you to ask. I'll take the second part first. I absolutely believe that kindness can be taught. I actually think that 18-month-old child who was sharing the food learned that from the parents. And I do know that there are efforts in some schools to teach kindness and to teach other basic related skills, like how to give an apology that's a real apology, and how to share, really important things that it turns out lots of kids are coming to school and don't learn. So it is on the schools to do it, and I think it can be taught. I think it is being taught, but it has to be deliberate, and it has to not be pushed out of the curriculum because of a focus on math skills or something like that. As to public policies, this is tougher. I like something like the World Happiness Survey. I liked having metrics that actually tried to build into what public policies try to do, something that relates to this topic. I do think that trying to understand unkindness and deal with insecurities and fear that may cause unkindness may be relevant to promoting kindness. But ultimately, it's about the quality of the people who are leaders. And if, we select as our leaders, or somehow people take power who are not kind, there's very little that people can do. No jokes? No stories?
Hi, thank you very
Hi.
much. I haven't seen you since 1L.
It's true. Your hair is different.
Would you believe they cut it off me? So one of the things that bothers me a lot a bit, is that our profession posits a norm of zero-sum victory. It kind of manufactures a sort of scarcity that I think predisposes us to a certain unkindness, both to our peers and also towards our adversaries. So I'm wondering, in light of that, propensity towards unkindness, what does it mean to be a zealous advocate, but also lead with a practice of consideration, generosity, kindness, and buck that norm of scarcity?
It's a super question. I agree with your description. I also have seen really different subcultures among lawyers. And I think to the extent that you can choose to be in a subculture where kindness is actually rewarded as opposed to punished, I would do that. It's one life. The discovery requests that are dumped on your desk at 6 p.m. on a Friday, that's a norm in some communities. And other communities, unacceptable. Can't do that. I do think that even in the communities that have this lack of kindness and have a kind of cruelty, you can shock people by being kind. And if you have the chance to actually have a third-party witness, a judge, a clerk, and you're kind and the other side is not, you do better. So just in a very practical way, kindness is not rewarded. Kindness is rewarded and unkindness is not rewarded. It's really hard to do to change a culture by yourself. I think that having some agreement with other people, this is a plan that we're gonna engage in. It makes a difference. I talked to an alum recently. She's been a judge for about 25 years in Delaware, and she was explaining to me everybody who's in the legal community in Delaware knows each other. I didn't know that. And that as a result, you can't get away with unkindness. It's just, you're gonna see the sister-in-law in another setting. So small communities make a difference.
Thanks, Professor. Can you talk about how Harvard Law School as a place has changed in terms of kindness, especially over the time that you were a leader as a dean and as you sort of continue to be a leader on campus? And were there particular ways that you tried to change the culture of kindness when you were dean?
Well, thanks for that. When I arrived here, in the Stone Age, the rumor was, this is back when people did research with books, that if there was an assignment for 1Ls, the first people there would take a razor blade and cut out the relevant stuff. I don't know if that was true, but it was so widely circulated, it was actually created fear in the community. And there was a culture of hissing in class. So if people said something that somebody didn't like, they'd start to hiss. And there are, yeah. Yeah. And there are graduates of that era, the 80s, who I know to this day hate this school and will never give a dime because I was hissed in class. Some of them, unfortunately, are judges. So there were problems. There were certainly lack of kindness between faculty members. So faculty workshops were basically target practice. I wouldn't say everybody, but it was enough that it was a problem. So, Elena Kagan was the dean before me. Elena Kagan was my former student. Elena Kagan became my colleague. She then became my boss. Then she left town for a better job. I like to say, and I say it in front of her, she left me with a hole in the ground and a hole in the budget because she planned the WCC. So, and it was the subprime crisis, and we had some real challenges. But But I will say this, she was the person who convinced me that a leader can change an institution and change a culture. Because she, for the very first time in my many years at that time, I had been teaching here for more than 2 decades, she was the first person in power, an administrator, who said, students are the center of this institution, which had never been uttered. And it took a little while, but it started to reorient. So when I became dean, which I didn't want to do, but at subprime crisis, I thought, okay, if someone's going to cut the budget, I'd rather it be me. And I threw my body between the budget cutters and the clinical programs and preserved them. And there were some other kind of had-to-haves, like hygiene, female hygiene products in the bathrooms, which were cut. And I said, first day in office, they're back. So, you know, those kinds of policy matters, but absolutely, I did actually kind of look at the balance sheet and said, okay, what can we do that doesn't take any money? Because we had no money. Well, we can be kind. And we can grow the kind of human culture here. And, you know, little things, you know, having celebrations for people when they publish something, having celebrations for people when they didn't publish something. You know, I will never forget, we had a disastrous flood in the library caused by a leak in the roof. I have since walked on the roof many times, one of the perks of being a dean. And the disastrous flood damaged books, and it damaged a painting, the portrait that we had on loan of Justice Scalia being dripped upon. This was really a disaster. And for 36 hours, the staff were incredible. They brought in equipment to freeze dry the books so that they wouldn't get moldy. They rescued that painting, which was a really good thing because we would have gotten in trouble if it had been wrecked. I mean, just amazing. So, you know, what could I do? I, you know, came and cheered them on, but, you know, we then had a celebration of the staff who had done that. And, you know, people were stunned. There had never been anything like that before. So just little things like that, little things.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question. And no pressure, but it is important.
Thank you, Professor Minow. One thing that you taught us, a quote, is if men were angels, no government would be necessary. And I know, as you taught us, that our system kind of presumes that ambition will be made to check ambition, right? But still, at the same time, I can't help but think that a degree of good faith, at least, is required to kind of make it all work. Following court orders seems like one example, right? But I'm curious where you see kindness working in the structure of American democracy, which you taught us so much about.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and thank you for learning those things and reminding me of them. You know, we're living in a really tough time. I have an amicus brief in the Garcia case. This man who was admitted by the Department of Justice wrongly deported and is sitting in a jail in El Salvador. If you don't have respect for basic due process, terrible things happen. And as the judge, Harvey Wilkinson of the Fourth Circuit said in affirming the district court's order that the Department of Justice actually justify and come in and explain what they're doing, and they are supposed to be facilitating his return, he said quite explicitly, if we allow this to happen, then anybody, doesn't have to be a non-citizen, anybody can be deported and sent to a prison and never heard from again. So I do think there's a minimum level of respect that's necessary for a civilized society, and I'll fight for that with a smile. So you can fight with a smile. You don't have to be nasty about it, but and appeal to people's common humanity. That if this can happen to Mr. Garcia, it can happen to your daughter, it can happen to you. It's the basic recognition that we are each human beings